I'm James King. I'm from the National Institute of Health Library, and on behalf of NIH, I welcome you to the 2017 Drupal GovCon. We're honored to host again for, what is this, fourth, fifth year. We're happy to do it again. We've already blocked out the dates for next year, so we'll announce that later in the week. We want to make sure we thank Kathy Bass and the events management team for all the work that they do behind the scenes in lining up this space, all the rooms, dealing with the AV and everything. We're the beneficiaries of, since last year, they've been doing a lot of work to upgrade AV to 4K. So there's still some growing pains with it and stuff, but you'll see better resolution and better technology in each of the rooms as we go through. We also want to make sure we thank all of the many volunteers that were at registration at each of the different sessions. So please, everybody that's volunteered, let's give them a round of applause and thank them for their help. My pleasure to embarrass two of the volunteers, Jess Erie and Nina Ogor. They have birthdays, so just when you see them, make sure you embarrass them for their birthday. I think they're, 29, something? Most of all, we want to thank our sponsors, especially our core sponsors. You see all the sponsors showing up on the screen, but our core sponsors, Pantheon, Debug Academy, and Civic Action. So thank them for helping to make this day possible. A reminder that we, like many other conferences, have a code of conduct, so make sure you check that out on the website, but can really be summarized down in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures to be excellent to each other. So just be nice, play well. Other camps and conferences that we want to promote, Drupal Camp Costa Rica is August 3rd through 5th. Drupal Camp PA at University of Pittsburgh is on September 22nd, 23rd. Drupal Camp St. Louis, same date, September 22nd, 23rd. DrupalCon Vienna is September 26th through 29th. The Cornell Drupal Camp, October 19th and 20th. If there's other camps that we don't know of, there's stickers out at the registration for almost all of those. But you can also look at DrupalCal, DRUPICAL.com, and see all of the events Drupal related, so you can get your Drupal fix just about every month. So, some logistics. Global reach of this event. This has been going on for several years. It's become a national or global conference focused on applying Drupal in a government setting, federal, state, local, tribal. We have representatives from at least, these are the countries that I've been told of, Canada, Bulgaria, and India. So we're thrilled to have those speakers and participants that are coming outside of the US to help give us that global perspective. If you want to talk about us on social media, tweet to Drupal GovCon, or there's a Facebook page as well, that facebook.com/Drupal GovCon. Either one of those will get you into the conversation. Raffle tickets. There were raffle tickets up front here. We are giving away a 1-year membership to Drupalize Me. The drawing will happen after the keynote today. So if you haven't gotten tickets, get them now. Let's see, bathrooms. There's bathrooms here and over here, just outside, and go around to one side or the other. There's also upstairs. Let's see, we did run out of lanyards. More popular, the conference this year is more popular than we thought. So right now we're working on how to deal with that for tomorrow. But if you didn't get a lanyard, you can get a pin from one of those sponsors and kind of pin it on. Let's see, make sure you visit the exhibit hall. We have the cream of the crop, the best companies in the industry for Drupal. So make sure that you go and visit them, talk with them, and thank them for sponsoring, because without them, we wouldn't be eating these 3 days, as well as all of the training sessions and all this cool stuff that you get for free out of this 3-day conference. Remember, we are a government agency, so we have an active fire marshal program. So unlike the big Drupal conferences where the people are standing and clogging the doorways and stuff, we're not allowed to be sitting in the aisles or clogging the doorways and stuff. So if there isn't a seat in the room, find another session, please. We do have some flexibility. Oh yeah, and if people could kind of shift towards the center, we have more people coming in, and so you don't have to do leaps and jumps over. So if we could do some consolidating in here, that would be helpful. Lunch today. The lunch drinks. Go, move in. Lunch will be a two-part process. So drinks will be, when you go outside the doors, over to the right. If you found the coffee today, that's where the drinks will be, over in that right-hand corner. The food will be out in the tent, outside. So get your drinks, get your food, or get your food first in, get your drinks, whatever. But the food today will be box lunches, just like we've had last year and in years past. Box lunches will be out there. First preference will go to be for people that pre-register, people that have printed badges. If you have handwritten badges, you'll be next in line. See, tomorrow's lunch is JavaWorks, so that will be barbecue. And Wednesday will be from Moby Dick at House of Kebab. So we have a variety of foods for the next couple of days. If you got special request lunches, so halal, kosher, or gluten-free, and you ordered those in advance, I believe they'll be at the registration table, so go up there. If you were registered for that, then you'll get that meal. And don't forget, clean up after yourself. Opening reception this evening. Thanks again to our core sponsors, Pantheon, Debug Academy, and Civic Actions. We have a party tonight with an open bar. It's at Brickside Food and Drink, 4866 Cordell Avenue. Information's on the website. You do need tickets, and you need your badge in order to get in. You can bring kids, but they need tickets as well. Let's see. When I checked less than an hour ago, there were less than 50 tickets left, and we do have a physical limitation. So if you haven't gotten a ticket yet, register now, because now that I've said it, probably in the next few minutes, there will be no tickets left. So make sure you sign up for that. Now, I'm going to call, to get to the main event, I'm going to call up Civic Action to introduce our keynote speaker.
Wow. Thank you, everyone. And I just want to call out the organizers, Kirsten, James, Jess, Amy, everyone who's put this together. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you, guys. My name is Aaron Pava. I'm with Civic Actions. We are a core sponsor, and we've been participating with Drupal for Gov and Drupal GovCon for a number of years, and we're really honored to be here in the 6th year of this event. Oh, pardon me. So what we do is we provide open and agile digital services to the public sector. I'm not going to say a whole lot about the work that we do. If you want to see it, you could check out our website. Some things you may be interested more immediately is that today we are offering free massages, and we'd love to give you all a massage. They're not going to be awkward massages by us. That would be weird. We hired a masseuse for 10-minute massages. And just come to our booth. It's up on the top. Fill out your name, 10-minute slot. We got a lot of slots for the next 3 days, and we'd love to support you in that way. So today I have the really distinct honor of introducing Michelle Krejci. Is that the right way? Awesome. So Michelle is an outstanding individual. Like, what you may not know from her bio, and I just learned, she actually is a philosopher, actually has a doctorate in philosophy, and is a DevOps engineer. I don't know how many intersections of those two disciplines there are, but I think that actually informs some of her work. We were just having a conversation about actually how the tools actually impact our behaviors and how our behaviors impact the tools that we build. For example, we were talking about rockets, the size of rockets and how they navigate roads are completely dictated by Roman times and the size that the Romans decided how roads would be built and to get military equipment through and tanks and that type of thing. And early decisions that were made that built a foundation. And so we didn't have to rethink a lot of that stuff. And then that becomes the world that we live in today. And there's a lot of parallels to the way that we think about building software as well, right? Early decisions that were made in the infrastructure of Drupal, we don't have to rethink a lot of that things. And however, those early decisions have like impacted the design of educational institutions and government websites and any number of digital properties that we build. You know, that really informs you know, how we build the infrastructure. It's so embedded into the culture of it. So honestly, I really could not be more thrilled to introduce Michelle and to hear her talk about how everything is DevOps. Please welcome her with a warm round of applause.
Good morning, GovCon. Usually I start my presentations by congratulating everybody for being smart enough to know to attend my session. And I really like this format well. I like that this is the only one, except for the hall track, which is I can never compete with. But I want to congratulate the organizers of GovCon for being smart enough. For me specifically, but also to give space for this topic, to give specific space to talk about DevOps. So without further ado, if, before I begin, you are displeased with the pace that I am speaking, my presentation is available on Heroku apps, so you can go to everything-is-devops.herokuapps.com. We can load test it and see how it does. I'll get to that a little bit later, but if you wanted to follow along, also all of my, you can click on all the links that I have and all the references I have in my presentation. So without further ado, my name is Michelle Krejci. I'm a warrior princess. But also, I am a software engineer. So for a number of years, I built Drupal sites. I was a tech lead for a number of projects. Like a lot of people, a lot of EDU, a lot of hospitals, some government, we'll get to that. But now I work for Pantheon Systems, and I build the infrastructure that Drupal and WordPress sites run on. All right, here's my agenda. Now, this is my agenda for today, but it's also my political agenda, my world domination agenda. I want to create a shared understanding of what we mean by DevOps. So we all have to get on the same page about what I'm talking about. And to do that, I'm also going to talk about the history of the contagion, the spread of DevOps, and how it got into the Drupal community. And finally, I'm going to end by talking about where it's going. Okay, so when we talk about DevOps, we should first think about what problems does DevOps solve. Because DevOps is a solution to a problem. And to think about DevOps just on its own, to think about the words put together, development, operations, isn't very useful. Let's talk about the problem. So the problem is that at some point, people have a need. And that need is, I need a website. Someone at some point will say this. You will probably say this at some point if you haven't already. For example, the organizers of this conference got together, and presumably they articulated that they have the problem that they need a website. And we all have an understanding that this is a need now. This is something that people require to be able to communicate a message, to be able to connect with the world today. And we also have some understanding that in order to create a website, somebody needs to build the infrastructure, build the framework to deploy a website. This requires human effort. This requires something beyond what we can see. For example, maybe a lot of you build websites, and maybe your parents, for example, have no idea what that means, and they tell other people, I don't know, she does something with computers or something. But they understand generally that you're at a computer and doing something to make the website. So the pipeline in the public imagination, I think the public, at least has this tertiary understanding that there's a human being that creates the infrastructure for a website, that writes some programming code and stuff, and then puts that on a page somewhere, and that's how we fulfill that need. But let's not talk about that stuff right now. Let's bring it back to something more fundamental. We're going to use a better analogy here. So just to show that I'm empathetic and I understand my crowd here. So you need lunch, and that's a need that you have imminently. You have that need, and the way to solve the problem of I need lunch is to have a meal prepared for you. Some carefully tweezered out lunch. Someone's going to put some effort into putting food on a plate for you. And you might further have an understanding that food doesn't come from just anywhere, that there's some work, there's something that happens beyond what's on your plate, that someone actually went and grew that food and it came from somewhere. We all have that basic, I don't know, does something with food stuff, that there's a pipeline there that brings us our food. And the pipeline might look a little bit like this. We've got someone who grows the food, someone puts the food on the plate. But actually there's something in the middle there. There's something in that pipeline that we're missing. And, ooh, a teaser, what could that be? Let's do a brief aside. Brief aside about me. So something really important to know about me. My father is the executive vice president of Jeeps. And he has been for 35 years, executive vice president. I know what you're thinking, but it's not that Jeeps. Not that Jeeps, it's the other Jeeps you're thinking of, the Grain Elevator and Processing Society. It's that one. My father's executive vice president for Jeeps. And what does Jeeps do? If you've ever driven past one of these things, it's a grain silo. And most people don't know what this is. I have toured over 100 of them. I could tell you what this is. And there's a lot of equipment there. And so our general understanding is, look at all that equipment. Look at all that stuff for the grain people. And this stuff, detail-y bits around the infrastructure, this is a proud family business. I have been attending grain elevator and processing conferences since I was at the peak of my grace and beauty. It's been a long fall from that height. But here we are at a family outing at one of the conferences in Minneapolis. And when I went to these conferences, I would go to the expo hall, and my immediate impression of what the Grain Elevator and Processing Society is that it's a bunch of tools. This is an actual picture from this year's conference. The expo hall is packed with booth after booth after booth of people talking about their tools. And I learned pretty early on that that's not a really good way to understand what the Grain Elevator and Processing Society does. What they do is all of those tools are trying to solve a problem. They're solutions to a problem. And the kinds of problems that they're getting at are creating a contained delivery pipeline. They're trying to move things from the farmer into these silos and then into the silos to restaurants in a contained, deployable way. They also think about safe storage. There's a lot of needs, health and safety needs. There's explosions that can happen. A lot of these tools are about creating safety around storing the product as it goes from one place to another. They're about scaling. They have to think about they have to anticipate the needs of consumption and make sure that they have placed around the country the right infrastructure to be able to serve the communities and predict what those communities are going to need. They are about creating the environment specifically tuned for the different types of grain. There's lots of grain. They all have different needs. Making these silos specifically tuned and the delivery pipeline specifically tuned to the type of grain that they are delivering is all part of the equipment pipeline. And finally, they need to be able to rapidly deploy at any time. At any point, people need to be able to call up the grain, and the grain appears. My father's going to be watching this later, and he will be so upset by the way that I just described that. But you know the grain, Dad, you have the grain, and then they get the grain, and it's safe. But that's roughly what they do, which might sound like the thing between this growing of the food and putting the food on the plate. This is where DevOps is. That's what turns out my father was in the DevOps business, and I got into the DevOps business too. And so it might look something like this. You have someone growing the food, you have someone putting the food on the plate, and let's just insert the DevOps there. But actually, my argument is that by the time that you have a need for this kind of infrastructure, by the time you're going to these expos and you're requiring the tools to solve the problems I just talked about, your pipeline looks very different. You're not just picking food off the vine anymore. You have an industrial scale product. You're producing at a totally different level, and you're also delivering at a totally different level, at a totally different scale. These are not tweezers on a plate anymore. You're serving lots and lots of people. Like, hopefully in a few minutes, no, it'll be longer than that, guys. My presentation's a little bit longer than a few minutes. But you'll be eating eventually. We can't just insert DevOps into our pipeline, into our building website pipeline, and think that it's not going to change us. It does and has changed us. Our pipeline looks fundamentally different by the time we get to a place where we're inserting the kind of automation and delivery that we are inserting when we talk about DevOps and Drupal. In order for us to have DevOps, everything must become DevOps. So by way of explaining what DevOps means now, and by way of explaining what DevOps means specifically to the Drupal community, let me give you a brief history of Drupal going from farm-to-table Drupal to this industrial scale Drupal. So it starts, I think, in about 2010. And it starts with government, actually. In 2010, we learned that Drupal is scalable and it's safe. How did we learn that? When the White House deployed on Drupal. This was a momentous moment for Drupal because the very fact that Phase 2 was able to create a Drupal for something as high, with high visibility and public focus as the White House meant that Drupal had finally achieved the kind of infrastructure and the trust, really the trust, to be able to be trusted by something like the White House. The Associated Press quote here points out that this is a moment where we can trust open source as a secure means to have a website. Up until this point, and I don't know if you remember this, people were really, and maybe you guys know this more than anyone else, were really concerned about open source's ability to be safe. And there was a lot of concerns about the security around open source sites. When the White House deployed, it gave everyone that confidence that this is something that we can take seriously. And so the tools, if you went to an expo center and you looked at the tools that are associated with Drupal at this time, it would just be open source. The fact that Drupal was open source is a major component to being able to open up Drupal to become the industrial Drupal that it's become. And these are two presentations from the San Francisco DrupalCon that really speak to the fact that Drupal is coming out and becoming something that's scalable, that's safe, and that's trusted. All right, 2011. In 2011, we were talking about managing configuration and sorting out hosting. At the point that you are creating a Drupal, you need to be able to trust who's going to host it. Capital Camp came around in 2011. They're talking about preparing to scale over here, evaluating Drupal, lots of evaluating Drupals back in 2011 at Capital Camp. And the tools that really would represent where we were at right now at this moment is Rackspace and AWS, presentations about being able to actually put Drupal onto the cloud, and the features module. The features module came out in 2011, and finally we had a way to export configuration, and when we could export configuration, we could start thinking about playing with the delivery pipeline in a versioned way. Here are some presentations from various camps and DrupalCon on the advanced level. So these are advanced tracked presentations where people are talking about finally being able to have control over the configuration in Drupal. And then 2012. In 2012, we were talking about performance and we were talking about version control. At Capital Camp, we have finally some tracks. No DevOps at Capital Camp. We're site building, we're development, we're UX design, we're government. But over in Denver, actually not yet. Not yet. What a teaser. We're not talking about DevOps yet over in Denver. So it's side by side. But we were talking a ton about Varnish. And we were talking about Git. Do you guys remember when Drupal switched over to Git? So no longer CVS. In the previous slide, I showed you the picture of features. Features was in CVS. Drupal switched over to Git. That was a huge moment for Drupal, and thinking about how to version control our things and controlling our pipeline. We're exporting configuration still with features, but now we're talking about performance and how to really be able to make something like Drupal, a really heavy content management system, performant. And we were doing that with Varnish. 2013 came around, and we have Drush and automation. Over in Portland, huzzah, we've got a DevOps track over in Portland. Still nothing at Capital Camp. But the tools here were Drush and Jenkins. What Drush gave us the ability to do, Drush, the command line tool, was it gave us the ability to start scripting our builds. So we could start being very explicit about what it meant to build our Drupal site both locally and on a development level. And in addition to exporting features and exporting configuration, we started to write down what it actually meant to deploy our thing, which meant that it wasn't just people running through manual scripts now to deploy. They were really starting to automate a deployment and having it run as an executable over and over again on local machines and on production. And often people were using Jenkins to do that. Jenkins as an automation tool. And we can see a lot of the key presentations here at Capital Camp, but also at GovCon, talking about Drush, talking about testing infrastructure, talking about continuous integration, talking about building a pipeline. 2014 came along, and we were now looking to take all that automation that we had given on the production level, to take all that automation that we had given in terms of exporting configuration and automating our scripts, and really confining our local environments, and specifically the systems that our local environments were running in. Now we're starting to care that the environments that we're building our Drupals in need to be tested and built in the exact same environment that they're going to live on in production. And so we started seeing, and check this out, at Capital Camp, we have a DevOps section, DevOps and coding. We started to see that people were talking about building locally. But now this is a moment, this will be a check-in moment for us. This is 2014 now, and this is Morten speaking about where we were at with
file and drop it out so people who actually know, I am just a front ender, so what do I know about spreadsheet and figure out what numbers says what. But so people can do all the number crunching on it and figure out what we can figure out on it, and that could be really fun to see. I know that they actually there was a survey going on at the same time from the DevOps people. I have not answered that because I do have a lot of respect for DevOps, but I had no idea what they were talking about.
Right.
We are like, what's that?
So that's where we were. It was 2014, and there were, and I'm not poking fun at Morten, although I definitely am poking fun at Morten, but, and he's a major themer, he's done a lot of great work, but that was representative of how a lot of people still felt back in 2014, which is, DevOps, yeah, it sounds like something I have a lot of respect for, but I have no idea what that is. And there's actually a survey that came out, and here's a survey, Kevin Bridges talked about this at DrupalCon. They had compared year to year people's perceptions of DevOps. Back in 2012, a third of the community that they surveyed said that they would not use DevOps practices, that DevOps was not worth it. Remember, we're at a place of talking about Drush, we're talking about Jenkins and automation and build scripts. 2012, a third said no. In 2014, only one person in the survey thought that DevOps was not worth implementing. Everything else broke down in terms of being able to implement it. So the conversation really became, at this point, how do you implement DevOps? Not if you should implement DevOps. It was a major shift. And at this point, too, in 2014, 94% of people were using Git. We had a really rapid adoption of Git, especially after Drupal switched over to Git. And a lot of concern, this was last year that the DevOps survey was done, but there was a lot of concern back in 2014 about how to convince people that DevOps was important. And at this point, since almost everyone had gotten to that place, there was a need to think about how do you change your teams, how do you change your developers so that they adopt DevOps practices. At this point, now that we have these tools, we have to convince people to use them. And the tools for local automation, a lot of people were using Vagrant. Vagrant to manage a virtual environment. And a lot of people were using Ansible as an orchestration tool. I want to take a brief aside here that just like my experience going to Jeep's conferences and going to the expos and seeing all of this equipment, I am showing you some tools that have been used to implement these things throughout the history, but it's less important, the tools are less important than the problems that they solve. I'm hoping to make the connection between we're trying to solve specific problems, and these are some tools that people have used to solve them, but less important to remember the tools than to remember the problems that Drupal was solving at these points. And here's some presentations you can, if you want to go back in time and look at how we were talking about building local environments back then. 2015. In 2015, this was a continuous integration and continuous delivery breakthrough. This was, there are so many presentations about continuous integration and continuous delivery. Session after session, even here at GovCon became GovCon after a capital Con GovCon changeover. Yeah, going through the web archives was really fun for this conference. Of course, in LA, there's a DevOps track. The things people were talking about were continuous integration tools, Travis CI, Circle CI, the Behat. This isn't Behat's official logo, but it's instructive. BHAT was a behavior-driven development tool, was and is a behavior-driven development tool that's loved and utilized to specify what something does and to be able to automate it. But what Circle CI and Travis CI were able to give us, along with Jenkins, is a really flexible, expressible way for developers to start codifying their builds and to codify their testing scripts, and being able to take the deployment and the building and the testing out of their hands and have it all be automated. And testing with robots, that's what Circle and Travis gave us. Here's some really great presentations that sort of exemplify where we were at that point. 2016, just last year, now we're talking about improved release cycles. So now that we have all of these tools that can take us from local to exporting configuration, to scripting it, to building it somewhere else, to testing it somewhere else, to deploying it somewhere else, and we trust the infrastructure and the scaling and the safety, we started to see a lot of presentations that were just about putting it all together and getting it all to work. All right, so now that you have all these tools and we're all kind of sold on these tools, how do you get this stuff to work? And presentations around creating a delivery pipeline, creating a artifact deployment, really refining and versioning your deployment. And in 2017, you have to look no farther than this camp right here, because here, the first year ever, there's a solo DevOps track here at GovCal and Drupal. Yes. It's all on its own. This feels like and I'm here, this feels like, right? I mean, especially with the me being here, this really feels momentous. And there are conversations today and the next 3 days about containers. This is the new hip thing. You can go and check out these presentations on deployment, on orchestration, why Docker is better than everything else, why containers are the future. Look no farther than these presentations. And what's really exciting is that if you missed any of those steps along the way, there's all of these presentations, some of them you missed this morning, in the DevOps track that really are about the history, get to the history of the whole industrial Drupal. So if you're just getting into the industrial Drupal, and you might have missed a step along the way, you can get caught up at one of these presentations here at GovCon. So anecdotally speaking, what we're looking at here in this arc of Drupal history is DevOps now accounts for almost half of submissions to Drupal camps. And this is anecdotally from speaking to the organizers of Mid-Camp and Bad Camp and some other camps around here. They have complained to me about the infiltration of DevOps. And back when I was first presenting, Back when I was first presenting, I was one of 2 people speaking about this back in 2011 at the camps that I would go to. And now they're just lousy with DevOps presentations. And I now predict that we're going to see the DevOps track go away. I don't think we're going to see DevOps very much longer. Sorry, I know you guys just got it. I don't think we're going to see it much longer because at the point where over half of presentations are about DevOps, I think what's happening here is that everything is just DevOps now. At a certain point, you don't have to ask for an agile developer anymore. Developers just are agile now. And you don't have to, or you shouldn't have to ask for a critically thinking engineer anymore, because that's just a quality that they presumably have. And I'm arguing that DevOps is now a quality that we all have. And it's becoming an expected quality and required quality, and not something that's very specific. We wouldn't have a critically thinking track, or maybe we would, but we don't currently have a critically thinking track, and I don't think we're going to have a DevOps track much longer because the pipeline has totally changed. It's been transformed by DevOps now, so it all is about DevOps. But now we must talk about the resistance. Because perhaps some of you know of the resistance. Perhaps you are the resistance. And let's talk about what that means. So I have a few moments here. I worked for a couple of government sites, or large enterprise sites. And large enterprise sites are sites with bureaucracy and red tape, things you might not know about, but they're things, where DevOps was not something that I could have any control over. So I'm an advocate of DevOps. I've been talking about this for years, but this was one of my clients. I was building a site for an enterprise client, and they have their own servers on site under lock and key, and they've got 3 guys that have been working there for 20 years and like not interested in the vagrant stuff, and they just wanted the handoff. They wanted me to just give them the Drupal site, and they were going to take care of everything from there. The project manager I was working with on their team had enough intuition to know that DevOps was a thing, but in her mind it was a 30-minute phone call of a handoff. And she scheduled a DevOps call for me for 30 minutes to discuss with their operations person about okay, we're going to give you the tarball at this point, and then we're done with the site. That was DevOps. I also had a client, a government client, who might be here today, and if you are, let's go and get a drink later, because their deployment process was I logged in through a VPN on my MacBook. So I logged in through a VPN into a virtual buffer of a Windows XP machine, and I clicked on Start and opened PuTTY to SSH onto their server to deploy the tarball. That was their deployment pipeline. And as much as I wanted to be part of that other, I didn't want to build these bespoke, tweezer plates. I wanted to be a part of another pipeline, but they weren't ready for that pipeline. And the reason they're not ready for that pipeline is because of bureaucracy and silos, and because they have no means of control over their pipeline. How am I going to create DevOps when that's their control? When they have whole warehouses full of servers, and they can't possibly tell me what the operating system is, because that's somehow a security risk. That's what we're contending with the resistance. And I think that that's fine if that's what we're building. If we're sort of building these individual artisanal plates, and we can sort of spend time deploying those. But I don't think that's where we're at anymore. And I think whether the resistance is with us or not, we're going to pull them along. And we're going to pull them along because you never know when suddenly you need DevOps. And everyone's learning this lesson, especially in government. Everyone's learning this lesson pretty quickly here. So let me give you some examples. This is the ACLU. And the ACLU gets $3 million a year every year. They make $3 million in donations in a year. Okay. At the end of January, Trump issued an executive order to stop Visa green cards, stop green cards. This created chaos in the airports. It was unclear what was going to happen with green cards. Maybe some folks in this room remember that. It wasn't that long ago. It was January. Oh. Just back in January. And what happened was the ACLU sent their lawyers to the airport to meet these people who are having all this confusion about visas. And because this was on the news, and there was, I mean, what a dramatic, there's ACLU lawyers, and I mean, it's just, it's civic action, you know, it was so exciting. People came to the ACLU, and a site that typically gets 100 hits per minute got 4,000 hits per minute. A site that typically receives 3 million in annual donations received 25 million in donations in one day. $25 million. Yes. And it was important that that site was available that whole time. It was important that every single one of those donations could be made. And this site never went down, baby. This is on Pantheon. It's scaled. Yeah. It was me personally. I was building the more servers. Like Fantasia. You know, automation and stuff. It's really helpful. Okay. Here's another example. The Congressional Budget Office is a noble, respectable, nonpartisan office that I've heard a ton about. I never heard of Congressional Budget Office so much until this year. So much Congressional Budget Office. Can you tell what dates every healthcare plan? How many healthcare plans have we had? You can tell just looking at the CBO report. It has needed to reach its limit. So this is Google Trends, and 100% is the most it ever gets, right? So we went to like a pretty quiet, sleepy site to all of a sudden everyone is hitting the CBO. I was biking home one morning and I was listening to the Vox, the Weeds podcast, and Sarah Cliff, you know, who is a layperson in tech, but you know, a really great political commentator. She had this throwaway line that when the CBO report came out, she was worried that the site was going to go down. She was expecting it to go down. She made this comment on her political podcast that she couldn't believe that the website was up when the CBO report came, which is both really exciting that the CBO was ready. They were prepared. That's so heartening for the CBO that they knew that, and they had a DevOps pipeline. They were prepared. They knew that this could happen. But it's also disheartening that the general public still expects that not to be the case. They still have an expectation that things aren't going to be available to them when they need it to be available to them, because they have an understanding that not everything scales. This is a general public idea. And I think we need to change that. And in order to change that expectation, people should expect that they can have the communication that they want to have, they can have the information that they want to have available to them when they want it to be available. And so if you're with me, if you're able to fight the resistance, this is what the future is going to look like. It's going to be automation. Everything will be automated as much as possible. Where automation is going to a lot of chat ops. Chat ops, I think we should take chat ops seriously. And when I'm talking about chat ops, if you know of Slack, or you know, people know about Skype and HipChat, Slack is pretty popular because it has a great open API that makes this easy. But I think chat ops is a cool iteration to think about, because I can be able to automate a deployment from a command line, which means other people can see what I'm doing. So if you can imagine being on a Slack, in a Slack chat with the general public, perhaps it's a Drupal chat, and I'm deploying and making commands out in public so other people can see them. That means other people can step in, they can undo what I'm doing, they can see what I'm doing. It adds a great deal of transparency to the process that I think is otherwise lacking. So I'm really excited by at least thinking through giving visibility and teaching other people how things are done. We're also automating our deployments, we're automating our workflows, and a lot of the presentations that I've linked to here are really great examples of doing all of those things. And containers, again, you have to look no farther than this camp to learn about containers. Containers, at this point, are where things are going. If anyone has tried to update their local computer, if anyone's run any sort of updates, and maybe you save it for the weekend because you don't know what's going to happen, and like you don't want to like disrupt your work day. Anyone do that? Wait until like no one's looking, update their computer. Right, because updating state and changing state is really hard. We're not doing that anymore. We're not going to be changing the state of virtual machines. We're going to take, when we need to make A into B, we're not going to change A into B or merge B into A. What we're going to do is we're going to create B alongside of A, and then we're going to delete A and replace it with B. That's what containers give us, and that's where we're moving towards. There's less surface area, isolated components, faster deployments. These are the talking points, guys. Memorize the talking points. The understanding will come later, but start talking about it now, and let's get on message. The cloud. The cloud's been around back in San Francisco at DrupalCon 2010. We were talking about the cloud. It's all back to the cloud now. Everything's in the cloud. If you haven't had an opportunity to work in the cloud, my presentation lives in the cloud. Here's my presentation. It's in the cloud. Check it out. It's got a continuous integration pipeline. It's on Circle. I run it through a linter. I have terrible HTML, so I'm smart enough to know how to pipe failures into a success. So you can get a sense and an example of what it looks like to use some of these tools. If you don't have an opportunity to do this, and it deploys it to Heroku. My presentation is publicly available, so if you haven't had an opportunity to do something like this yet, feel free to copy my presentation. And to copy its continuous, its Circle CI builds, its Heroku builds, and everyone has to make a presentation, right? It's something everyone has to do. Play around with it, see if you can get a sense of what it looks like to deploy something to the cloud. And lastly, we've talked a lot of, you've seen a lot of testing. You've seen moments where in our pipeline, in our delivery, we have injected moments of checking our code and verifying that things are done. And that's still, you should still test your code. I'm not saying don't test your code. Please do or start that. But monitoring and thinking about testing from a place of monitoring thinks about it in more of a sustainable way. Thinks about maintaining the system. I'm specifically linking here to Site Reliability Engineering, Google's openly published book. I recommend at least reading the first 4 chapters. And how this changed my thinking about testing is I've started thinking less about testing my code than describing what is the minimal requirement for my code to meet what a stakeholder needs and to monitor on that. So my monitor might be very small. I might have a percentage of success for the commerce cart, for example. So maybe my metric of success is that the commerce cart is available 95% of the time. And so my script might measure the error rate of the commerce cart and alert me, maybe call my phone, if something is going on with that particular requirement. So it just changes the thinking about how a site, what it means for a site to be done, in terms of what would it look like for a human being to need to intervene when it's working on production. I highly recommend you read those 4 chapters. This is really where things are going. And at this point, finally meet your need to eat lunch. And I would like to just ask that you take a moment when you're doing so to appreciate the DevOps pipeline which brought you that lunch. I know that farm to table is really trendy and hip, but there's some cool dorks who have been working on the deployment pipeline of highly scalable, deliverable food for quite some time. So please take a moment while you're eating to appreciate that. I'm not going to take any questions. Thank you very much. But if you'd like to talk to me, please tweet at me. I'm also going to hang out here if you'd like to talk to me. Thank you so much for coming, and join me. Yeah.